This is IGN. Feliz Navidades. This is your IGN review of Avatar Fire and Ash by Max Scoville. 3 years ago, I sat down to watch Avatar The Way of Water with one big question on my mind. Could James Cameron deliver a sequel to his 2009 blockbuster that's worth a 13-year wait? 3 hours and 12 minutes later, and it was abundantly clear that, yep, dude still got it. Earlier this month, when I sat down to watch Avatar Fire and Ash, I had a lot more questions. A couple were about loose ends from the previous film, but my more pressing queries were about the film itself. Would a new Avatar film after just 3 years pack as much of a punch as the one that benefited from a middle schooler's lifetime of anticipation? Also, Cameron's made some of the best sequels of all time, but what does a Cameron threequel look like? Well, 3 hours and 17 minutes later, I didn't have quite as definitive an answer to either of those questions, but I did have one huge smile on my face. Avatar Fire and Ash picks up immediately after the events of The Way of Water. Jake, played by Sam Worthington, Neytiri, played by Zoe Saldana, and the rest of the Sully family are mourning the loss of their eldest son, Neteyam, played by Jamie Flatters in The Way of Water. They've finally been accepted into the Metkayina clan, but aside from the looming threat of retaliation from the RDA, there are a couple factors preventing them from properly settling down. For one, Jake's favorite form of grieving involves preparing for war with the humans, an interest the Metkayina clan doesn't share. Two, they have a kid who can't breathe. Their adopted son, Spider, played by Jack Champion, still needs a rebreather to survive in Pandora's atmosphere, and they only have one backup battery, which, to put it lightly, is stupidly risky. So Jake makes the unpopular call that Spider should go live with other humans, and to soften the blow, proposes that they make a family vacation out of it by hitching a ride with the nomadic airborne Tlalim clan, aka the Wind Traders. Aside from all the grieving, Fire and Ash looks and feels very similar to The Way of Water in the early part of the film. While that's by no means a bad thing, it's initially lacking in the spectacle, novelty, or, for lack of a better word, newness I was hoping for from another Avatar. However, that quickly changes with the arrival of the Wind Traders. The Avatar movies have always been a visual feast, but an armada of vessels suspended from enormous, flying, jellyfish-like medusoids pulled by cephalopodian wind rays literally and figuratively blows the more familiar imagery out of the water, especially in 3D on a huge screen. My one hang-up about Fire and Ash, if you can even call it that, is that it gave me a sense of déjà vu. Some of the visuals and story beats tread very close to those in the previous films, to the point that it almost felt like deleted scenes or alternate takes intercut with new material. But looking at Cameron's past work, it's safe to assume this is a feature and not a bug. George Lucas once described the Star Wars prequel trilogy's relationship to the original by saying, "It's like poetry, they rhyme." I would argue that Cameron's sequels have a tendency to amplify an echo rather than taking a familiar concept, theme, or visual and presenting it as a flipped mirror image. His sequels take something we know and present a grander, more operatic version. A lot of The Way of Water was spent establishing new characters, relationships, stakes, and rules, but in Fire and Ash, the groundwork has been laid, so everything hits the ground running. Cameron does plenty of his trademark supersizing of existing ideas, but the new film rhymes as well. For instance, Quaritch's relationship with Varong is like a twisted reimagining of how Jake and Neytiri started out, and as much of a thrill as it is to see all the visual spectacle and action sequences, it's just as cool seeing the Quaritch-Varong dynamic juxtaposed with Jake and Neytiri, who are long past the honeymoon phase. When watching Fire and Ash, it was hard not to compare it to third installments in other notable sci-fi and fantasy movie franchises, and it kept reminding me of a couple all-timers. As a direct continuation of The Way of Water, it's reminiscent of the Return of the King's escalation in the wake of the Two Towers. That's not to say Fire and Ash has multiple false endings, but rather that it's got some truly epic battle scenes and enough plot threads going on at once to keep it from dragging, but not so many that it's difficult to track who's doing what. Avatar Fire and Ash isn't the technical leap forward that its predecessor was, which is to be expected after 3 years instead of 13, but what it lacks in novelty, it more than makes up for with refinement on every level. The planet Pandora feels slightly less alien, but its denizens become a lot more familiar, and James Cameron has given them and his first trilogy an immensely gratifying finale that's well worth the wait. Avatar Fire and Ash's IGN score? 9 out of 10. Thanks for listening to IGN. My name is Tony Jackson, and for the latest Avatar Fire and Ash updates, visit us at IGN.com.
Spoken Layer.